Hello and welcome to the German New Medicine Stories podcast. May listening bring liberation and lightness to your healing journey. Please note that nothing that I or any of my guests say here is or should be misinterpreted as medical information or advice. These are personal stories, not prescriptions. So hello, I hope you all had a beautiful Christmas. Holidays are always a wonderful opportunity to see the 5 biological laws in action in your own body or your children or your parents or whatever. One, because you're, out of your day-to-day routine for, most people. Oftentimes you're leaving your home, going to visit family. And so there can either be, certain symptoms will go away or they will grow in intensity or new old symptoms might come back, which can really help you narrow in on tracks. So for example, I've been pretty sure I have this kind of, at nighttime, I get this, only the past year, this, like it's periosteum. So it's the periosteum program. So it's like a brutal separation. It's kind of like electric, sensation in my legs. And it's only when I get in bed. And, I was quite certain that because we sleep on this like huge sheepskin. It's not just one, it's like 6 all kind of woven together. And that it's the sheepskin itself that is the track. And going away, I completely affirm that because going away for 3 weeks, not sleeping on a sheepskin like normal, no symptom at all. And then coming back here last night was our first night home. And I was paying attention, like, is it going to happen? And it totally did. And it's absolutely the sheepskin. And so that gives me, one, I know what the track is. 2, I, can hone in on, I'm pretty sure I know what the DHS is. Anyway, so that's just a small example, but so there's that. There's kind of like what tracks do you step on and off of as you do your routine shifts typically over the holidays. And then of course, most people go back to their families or around family. And that's just a context where a lot of conflict and surprise can occur. And so, really common to get symptoms around Thanksgiving, Christmas. And remember, it's not because you were exposed to some new contagion and everyone caught something. It's that there is a lot of conflicting experiences to be had when we all come together with our families in the pressure of holidays and, wanting to have a good family experience all together. And so, yeah, I really hope that a lot of you got to, see this pattern, see the 5 biological laws, see the law of 2 phases, really feel what a conflict shock was or what it was like to, go back home and perhaps, have an old symptom reemerge from your childhood because something at home is a track for you. So yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about too before I get into the interview is right before Christmas, I went to LA and did a 5-day, well, 2 days more like specifically of the course, but I was there for 5 days, German medicine intensive with Dr. Sasha Tessick. And Dr. Sasha is one of the few remaining people alive who worked, very extensively in person with Dr. Hammer. And, he reads brain scans. He is a practicing doctor of German medicine in Croatia and, has been, I think, for like 20 plus years. And it was just such a gift to spend, so many days with him and to get to ask so many questions. I mean, so many questions clarifying, lots of little things that I've read or heard from other teachers. But getting to clarify it with him was super helpful. And like, how did Dr. Homer figure out certain things? And also to hear so many stories about Dr. Homer and to just, from someone who really knew him and spent a lot of time with him. And yeah, that was really fun and sweet. And of course, to be around just so many other people who are, really integrated with the 5 biological laws and with German medicine. And, we were primarily focusing on the topic of constellations. This is the most kind of like advanced in German medicine, the psychoses, these psychological adaptations. And yeah, it was just the best. And fun to meet some people who listen to this podcast. I'll share a funny story. A woman, I forget her name, but if you're listening, hello, who came up to me and said she listens to the podcast, which is always lovely, by the way, to like, when you're in this virtual world, to like meet people and remember like, oh yeah, like real people care and like and are listening and it is impacting their lives. But anyway, she was just she made a really sweet comment about how, on this podcast I sound very like calm and I know that she has something like you have a meditation voice or something like that, and that in person I'm a lot more like lively and gregarious, I guess. And I thought that was fun. And actually Sasha said the same thing because we've been on Zoom for many months before this event, and he was like, yeah, you really surprised me. You're much warmer in person than you are online. So I don't know, funny reflections of no matter how yeah, I don't know, authentic you strive to be online, that it's always and forever going to be different than who you are in the flesh. And so yeah, lovely to spend time in person, and just I feel more stoked on Germany medicine than ever. And yeah, that brings me to this interview that I'm sharing today with a mother that I worked with named Annie, all about her son's resolution of his eczema. So it's a separation conflict. In this case, it was with her husband, his father. And yeah, I mean, I love working with mothers of other children. I love working with pregnant women. And, just myself, this is like such a present topic for me in my life, not pregnant yet. But yeah, just really thinking of, when you learn the 5 biological laws, it really does shift your understanding of the consciousness of children and babies, and even from the very moment of conception. So yeah, I think this is maybe one of my favorite conversations yet. And we get into lots of kind of talk about strategies for how to help children resolve conflicts, and also how to prevent biological conflicts. And at the very end of the conversation, that Annie and I recorded this before I went to LA, and we were just talking about something which is, I have sort of concluded or been playing with in my own mind and with women that I've been working with, which is the idea of like, because a core element of a conflict shock, 3 criteria, right, of a conflict shock, one of them is the surprise, to be caught off guard. And if you take that element away, if you take any of the 3 criteria away, you don't have a conflict shock. You might have a challenging experience, but it's not a conflict shock that's going to lead to a biological adaptation. And yeah, just how you can actually work to mitigate that element of surprise as a parent, and the power that has to really, help your child navigate the world, and, the many experiences of life without necessarily initiating, so many biological programs. And it was actually really great because I got to affirm that idea with Dr. Sasha, because he sort of mentioned a similar thing several times. He said, like mothers often they don't want to deal. He gave a very specific example of like, no, you're going to move. And instead of, for months, but instead of telling your child, 3 months, many months before the move, easing them into the experience because they don't want to deal with like 3 months of an upset child, and kind of navigate that emotion. It's like, the day of, we're moving today, and that's a huge shock. And so, yeah, he really did kind of affirm this, what Annie and I are talking at the end of this conversation that you're about to listen to, that you can, as a mother, as a parent, kind of as much as possible, take away this element of surprise, and prepare your child for life. And to, again, like when you know this information, you realize how conscious, our culture is just like so, I don't know, sick in the way that it views children and babies, especially as just kind of like blobs that don't have any awareness until they're older. Of course, that is not true, and the 5 biological laws prove that. The symptoms that children experience prove that. The symptoms that children are born with prove that they're experiencing complex shocks in the womb even. And obviously, I want to note, the point is not to have a child with no symptoms. That is not the point. That is not the point of learning German medicine, is not to never have a symptom. It's not to, create some perfect life where your child, gets all the way to adulthood without ever having ran a special biological program. Not the point at all. So yeah, hopefully that's not what you take away from this conversation. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now and jump into the interview. I hope you enjoy. And as always, please reach out with any of your own stories. I love hearing them.
You. Well, I started following you on Instagram in 2020, and then at some point you started sharing about German new medicine, and that's the first time I ever heard about it. And I think I was in a perfect position to take it in at the time. I've been on this, personal health growth journey for many years, and I feel like German new medicine was the next piece of the puzzle. I had been working on all of my, obvious sort of traumas, but since I became a mom now a year and a half ago, it had brought up a lot of stuff for me that I felt very confused about, and I didn't really know what to do with, the symptoms that my son was having, which was eczema. So he developed eczema when he was 4 months old, and slowly it kept sort of spreading across his body. It started just very small spots on his back, and at the time I didn't think anything of it, didn't think it was anything serious, but then at some point I was like, oh, maybe I need to change my laundry liquid, and then I noticed that water really triggered the eczema. Anytime we had a bath or he had a shower or we went for a swim, it would flare up. And my son was actually born in Finland, and the symptoms started presenting itself when we moved back to Australia. So then I thought, oh, maybe it's the water. The water is different here. He's used to the fresh lake water in Finland, and there's obviously some chemicals or something in the Aussie water that makes it happen. Obviously, you go through all of these scenarios, and nothing really made it better. In fact, it kept getting worse and worse. And then when he was about, I think, 9 months, 10 months, it really started spreading all across his torso and back and legs and armpits and arms. And at this point, I'd already read a little bit about German new medicine, but it didn't really click. I felt like I needed to do some, deconditioning around what healing actually is. But I had an understanding and this sort of intuition that this could be emotional. So I never went down the route of trying to change my diet or his diet. I didn't believe that food was the solution. And I kept digging on the emotional side of things. And when I heard that skin symptoms are separation conflicts, then I started to think that, hang on, when we moved back to Australia from Finland, my partner went back to work, and he works away. So usually he works away for 2 weeks, and then he comes home for 2 weeks. And then when I actually counted the actual days, I realized that the first spots appeared when my partner came home from his first trip away from home. That time he was away for 3 weeks.
First resolution.
Exactly. So the first resolution came when he came home, and the conflict was never really solved because he didn't stay home. So he kept leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. And then I was like, okay, well, I know it's linked to my partner going away, but then I didn't know what do I actually need to do to fully make it, make it better for him. He was getting really itchy, whereas at the beginning the spots weren't really irritating him, but at this point he was really inflamed and couldn't really sleep. The itchiness and the discomfort would wake him up. So I was really motivated to go deeper into it. And I think it was when you posted that 2-hour video about 5 biological laws, and I watched that, and like that really helped me. Then I actually like understood the laws a little bit deeper, and like something clicked. Then me and my girlfriend went to a park one day with my son, and I was just talking about this, like trying to understand the whole thing a little bit deeper. So what ended up happening was that my son was in a swing, and then I was on the other side and my friend was on the other side, and we just kept pushing him, and he was just kind of doing his own thing, and me and my friend were just talking and talking and talking, trying to solve the case. And then it was my friend who said, like, well, hang on, maybe, like, yes, you do tell your son that the dad's coming back and it's okay, and you don't, it's okay, but it's still hard, right? It's still hard that he goes away. And then I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like I didn't actually give myself that permission to really feel how hard it is when he goes away. I went into this kind of a survival mode that, we can do this, I'll manage, like it's you and me, whatever, like we do fine even if my partner isn't here. So me sort of blocking myself, or me not allowing myself to really feel how hard it actually is to do the whole single mothering thing for more than half of the month. My son didn't have the space to feel his feelings around the topic. I was like, I didn't want him to be upset about it. There's also, a lot of guilt involved. So I think there was like, I was unconsciously protecting myself from that guilt of like, our life arrangement is like, and our life choices are causing, hurtful feelings in my son. But of course, nature is so wise that he would find another way to express his feelings, which was, I think, through this eczema. And so this was like a big realization when he was on the swing. And then I was like, I wonder if this will change anything, me just having this aha moment. And that night when he went to bed, he just developed this fever. He was really hot all night long, and his skin was super inflamed at that point. And then the next morning when we woke up, the fever was gone, and all of the red spots the inflammation had gone down. So all of these, his body was just like dry. The skin was dry, but no longer red, no longer itchy. And I was like, what the hell? Like, this is so like, what? Like, it's so weird, because normally like the inflammation, when it's that bad, it takes a week or two to go down. He'd have these cycles of like, it doesn't disappear overnight ever. It like slowly gets, the spots go lighter and lighter, and then the new flare up would come. So he never had the period of actually healing the skin sort of fully. And so I knew we did something right in that moment. And then I booked a session with you because although we had this big realization, and the eczema went from being like 100% down to maybe 25%, he still would have flare-ups on his legs, and the water was still sort of a track, but the rest of his body has been completely fine since then. And when I saw you sort of shed more light to the situation, and you told me that it can be really helpful to talk to the unconscious, like the baby's unconscious. So I guess that's what happened on the swing. Like I wasn't speaking to him about the situation, I was speaking to my friend, so, and he was just kind of hearing.
Yeah, like for children, it's like too direct, like it's like a fire hose or something, if you speak directly to them. But it's just like such a perfect, one of my teachers, Gilbert, like he, tell these stories, like he would do these sessions with mothers, and like he'd have the kids kind of, if it was a baby, maybe they'd be breastfeeding in the mother's arms or like in the corner of the room playing or whatever. But just, it's like in the background. Or he would say, go home and like, have a conversation, like, with your husband, but like never directly to the child, because it's too much. It's like, it just like they just like shut off, but it was like just the serendipity of this, right? It's like so perfect of pushing. I've told this story lots of times now because I love it, of just this image of like the baby and the swing and the pushing and the just that that space your friend held. And like your baby, like this subconscious of your child was like, oh, hear this. And also you also felt, and it's at that age, like the mother baby dyad, you also had a real shift in like letting yourself see the truth of what was going on. So that together just culminated, and I love it. It's such a good story.
Yeah, and it was just so funny because it wasn't intentional at
Totally.
all.
Yeah,
Just how it ended up going, and it was perfect just as it was.
yeah.
And now he will still get flare-ups if we go into the seawater, and that's kind of the only track left. But like the spots that he gets are like so small, not itchy, not like it doesn't disturb him. But I'm working on that piece. We had a session.
I'm trying to remember. So when we talked, we were just kind of like getting, like seeing more of the bigger picture. So like the separations that happened during your pregnancy too with him, right? Because your partner was also working away during some of that. And then I think like this move, Australia, Finland, like, people in all these different places. And then also his birth story, right? He was separated from you after birth as well.
Yeah, there was an hour when he was couple of hours old, when we were separated for an hour. Yes. And so I did some work around all of these different separations.
And by that, do you mean, so you were telling him while he was sleeping, right?
He was sleeping, and I would take, I think it was like over a course of like 7-8 days, whenever he went for a nap or whenever he fell asleep for his nighttime, bedtime, and I would spend not maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, just explaining everything as much in as much detail as possible. And I'm not sure which
was the one
particular case was it for him that really resolved a lot of the remaining tracks. Who knows? But I must have hit the spot here and there.
So for listeners, just to explain this kind of technique, is the same idea of you want to speak to your child's subconscious, and one of the ways to do that is kind of while they're sleeping, you can tell them these stories. And again, Gilbert Renaud, one of the things he says is that often the child can become the biological solution for the unresolved emotional issues of the parents. And so, when we were working together, we were going back even to like the conception, which if I remember, there was even like separation almost in like you were trying to conceive for a while, and it was like timing wasn't overlapping, right, with when he was away.
Exactly.
And and then your emotional experience as the mother. And we have, we understand, and the children are like conscious, from conception, and having an experience in the womb that is so influenced by the experience of the mother and the father. And so and then of course the birth being, such an imprint, and that there's just something that happens, when you can tell your child this story. It's like, oh, it's not about me, like, and it's over, like the thought that I have too is like, you tell your child the birth story and it's like, you only get born once. Like whatever happened in the birth, like it's not going to happen again. It really is. It's a one-off occasion. And so, yeah, I love your whole journey with this symptom, and what a neat, how was that for you? Like the really experiencing it working for you? And not even like in your own body, but like through it's, it's like, it's one thing to do it for yourself, and then it's another to like facilitate that experience, in a newborn.
Yeah. It's just hard to believe that it can be that easy. And it's interesting because like I did have many months of like trying to work it out. It's not like I sat down and it was like, flick of the fingers and it was done. Like there was many months of me being like, what? Like I don't really get it, or trying to like understand the information more. But then once it clicked, it really clicked. And it was really cool to have that experience of like that this is how it's done. And it was also very healing for me to kind of talk about the birth and all of these little separation moments like with my son, because there definitely was the element like me not allowing myself to feel those feelings. So not only was it healing for him, it was healing for me, emotionally.
Yeah, totally.
And I feel like that experience was the first of many. Like since then it's been so much easier for me to crack the case quite quickly. And because there was definitely me not believing that it's possible to find the original conflict. I was like, like my memory isn't great. Like how like what if the conflict happened, years ago? Like I didn't think it would be possible to have that moment and have the symptoms sort of disappear as quickly as they have sort of since then.
It's so simple, but there's a big upfront learning curve, and it is not just learning the 5 biological laws and just like, reading, learning gnm.com, that's a piece, and it's really important to have the intellectual, but it's the learning to think biologically and to like, and to feel it. I think that's so much of like the point for this podcast for me, and obviously the one-on-one work that I do. It's like once someone could just have that first sensation of just like, oh, that's like the resonance of resolution. Oh, that's the resonance of a conflict shock. It's like, I don't know, as soon as people have it embodied like that, it's like then you just get it and you're off to the races. And so anyways, why don't we get into, you just have so many little stories that I love, so whichever one you want to start with.
Okay. I just want to kind of say that it's been so helpful to have a couple of friends who are into GNM as well. And we have this, group, messenger group, and it has turned into a GNM support group fully. Like that has made things so much easier for me. And I think also for them, like just having that space to share and like, just when you don't know what the track could be, have that like soundboarding space where you can just throw things in. And obviously that's the purpose of this podcast also. So that's amazing. But since the eczema case, there's been a lot of sort of smaller stuff that I have worked through. One very recent one was a cold sore that I had. It just popped up out of nowhere on the left side of my mouth, and I was like, well, what the hell is this? Like I didn't think that anything happened. Like there's no one I wanted to be separate from, or that someone I wanted to be close to. And it's funny because normally I use the cream that you can get from the pharmacy to help with the symptoms, but still the sore sort of remains at least 5 5 to 7 days. And funnily enough, my son had gone through my cupboards and had taken the cream, and he literally hid it somewhere. So I didn't have an option to go down that route. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to really see if this can be solved with GNM.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was lying in bed about to fall asleep, and I was thinking like all of the different what I've been doing in the past couple of days. And then I suddenly just came. I was like, I went to my yoga studio's Christmas party, and I ran into an older like male colleague, and then he came to me. Like, I love the guy, he's lovely. He gave me a hug, and then like he wanted to give me a kiss on the cheek, but I sort of turned my head to a wrong way, so he ended up giving me this like peck on the left side of the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And literally just for like a split second, I had this feeling of like, ooh, like, oh no, not on the mouth, like, no, I don't like, no, not there, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing was over. Like 10 seconds later, I did not think about the situation at all, but it was enough for it was enough for a conflict shock,
Yeah.
and then I fell asleep, and the next morning the sore was gone completely. I was like, okay, interesting, like very cool. And yeah, that was sort of a good experience for me to have. It's like the conflict shock is not conscious thing, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm consciously upset about the thing that happened. And for a long time, I thought that it would be something that was really, bothering me a lot in like a conscious thinking kind of place. But then I've noticed that it's actually more of the unconscious and the body that reacts. And getting to that place took a while. And it was cool to have that experience of like, oh yeah, like I wasn't that upset about it, but yeah.
But you were in that, like, that split fraction of a moment, and that's what it is, right? It's and realizing it's such a specific moment in time, right? Like there was one moment where he was just hugging you, and then there was another, and it was that whatever it was, a 7:05 on a Tuesday night. Like, it was such a specific time, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And then
and that pre-bedtime is like so potent, because I think because you're kind of when you sleep, you're in your subconscious, and so that there's something about that, like you're just falling asleep. That's like just the prime time to think and to just like let yourself float through your days, because I don't know, to me that's when it always comes, right then.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like most of my realizations have become on that time.
Do you want to tell the one about the sewage? Was it sewage water?
Yeah. In our previous home, there was this sewage pipe that exploded in the yard, and the smell was not good. It smelled like shit. And I was really calm about it. Like, I don't really get I can deal with that sort of stuff. I guess being a mom, it's like all sorts of fluids are part of your daily life. But my partner was really, really grossed out by that. And he was sort of holding my son and going like, yuck, like this is effing disgusting. Like, what the, like, why did this have to happen? And I was sort of like, oh, like, we just deal with it, whatever. And the plumber came, fixed the situation, and then what do you know, next morning my son has a runny nose, like my partner is getting sick. He has the exact same symptoms, and I'm completely fine. And it was so easy just for me to tell, like, this is like a literal stink.
Very, very literal.
Very literal. And then my son was in my partner's arms when he had the sort of the shock and like, yuck. And
it's so interesting to think about, right? Like, had your son been in your arms, would he have kind of like stayed in the resonance of just like, whatever, it's stinky, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's so, yeah, but in that moment, no, he was in the
Hmm.
resonance of your husband. And so that was what he experienced. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it didn't, neither of them developed any other, you know, cold and flu kind of symptoms. It's just the nose stuff. I guess because the conflict wasn't like super extreme or long, it was sort of like there, and then once the smell was gone, it was, you know, very short.
It wasn't a super like nuanced psychological experience. It was just,
yeah,
it's stinky. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't dangerous. It wasn't, there weren't other elements that would maybe trigger a different program, but
yeah,
just stinky and gross.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
then they also, you know, the symptoms sort of went away really quickly. And also I feel like I knew straight away what was happening. And I told them both, like, you see, like, this is a perfect example. And my partner doesn't necessarily believe in this GNM stuff yet. I'm slowly conditioning him with all of my stories, but he's not fully on board yet.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good example for him to also be like, oh yeah, like, I feel like they both sort of connected the dots. And it wasn't like the symptoms didn't last for long, more than a day or two. Yeah. What else? There was this story about the candidiasis. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. So I just developed that, like just
a
very
yeast infection.
infection. Yeah, yeast infection in my vagina. Very just suddenly. And again, I was like, what could this be? And then I did some Googling, wanted to know what the conflict was, and it was like, you know, it's like a implantation conflict. I think there's a couple of different conflicts you can have, but that one really just immediately resonated. And then I was like, yeah, a couple of days earlier, when I was supposed to get my period, I didn't really get it. It was very, very much just like spotting, and I was so fatigued and tired, and that just reminded me of being newly pregnant. So I had this kind of a pregnancy scare. I was like, oh no, like, maybe, what if I'm pregnant? But that was the shock. And then I did a pregnancy test, and that was the sort of when the healing could begin. It was resolved. The test was negative. I was like, okay, that's good, because I'm not ready to have another child just yet.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, the yeast infection is there. And it's itchy, and it's the same thing. I've had it before, you know, ladies. It doesn't go away in 12 hours. It takes a lot longer if you don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, like the next morning, the symptoms were just gone.
Yeah,
fully.
there is something to when you have the awareness, it's like you don't have to experience the symptoms in the same way. Yeah. I love it. I mean, I obviously doing so many work with women, like the pregnancy test, I mean, has to be like, for so many women, the conflict shock, and for so many women, the resolution. Just like how many, you know, symptoms are coming and going based on the pregnancy test is, you know, it's many.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine, for sure.
Yeah. You know what story I'm thinking of, and we didn't talk about that before recording, but I think can't remember what the symptom was, but they were related to the birds that he had the relationship, like in your old house, and he loved these birds.
Yeah, that's a cute one. Yeah, he's obsessed with birds. And in our old home, it was sort of like on the top of the hill, so we were on the facing the tops of the trees, so the bird life was amazing. We had all sorts of parrots and whatever, and he was obsessed, and every day we would spend a lot of time in the balcony just observing them. And then when we moved to our new place, he developed stomach issues. He didn't have a diarrhea, but I could tell his tummy was just sore. And then I think it was on that week when I had my first session with you, and I told you about it. And then you asked me just the right questions, like, what do you think might have been the conflict for him? Like,
Yeah, I think I probably said what's important to him, you know, because
Yeah.
I think so he wasn't having diarrhea, like was he
Mm.
vomiting at all?
There was no vomiting. I think he was just like constipated
Okay.
more than more than anything else.
Mhm.
Like things weren't really
Okay.
moving.
And I think you had known, so you had moved, you know, and then I was like, well, what is it about? Like, what specifically
Mm.
about, you know, because again, even just saying, oh, it's to move, like it's too general. There's
Mm.
within that, you know, that experience, there was something specific for your son that was upsetting. And so
Mm.
I think I probably said, you know, what was important to him. And it was just like immediately you were like the bird, you know, I would have never asked about the
Yeah.
birds. I didn't even know that, but immediately the birds, because there were no birds right at the beginning of
Yeah.
being at the new house.
Yeah, and he had his like specific bird friends, like the specific parrot and the specific kookaburra and the one butcher bird that came every morning, the same bird. And like we live in the forest now, but it's the birds are different. They're not his
Mm-hmm.
birds.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when you asked me that, I was like, oh, like it's the
Mm-hmm.
birds.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I did the same thing when he was asleep. I explained to him the whole thing, and then I took him back to the area where we used to live to see the birds again. We actually visited the house. It's owned
Mm.
by our friends, so we went back there, and like he saw his friends again, and I think he realized like it's not the end. Like
Mm. Yeah.
he can still visit them, and there'll
Yeah.
be new birds, and so he got that resolution, and yeah, again the symptoms went away very quickly after that. Yeah, and it's interesting because like if you didn't ask me that, I wouldn't have had a way to really relate to his experience in that way. So
Yeah, it's really important, you know, as parents trying to figure out conflicts, like you have to put yourself in a tiny little baby's brain, you know, like what,
yeah.
you know, what's his territory? Like what,
Mm.
who are the people, the beings that are important to them, and pets, and in this
Mm.
case, you know, wildlife sort of pet situation. Um,
Mm.
you know, that's what matters to him. And
Mm.
yeah, that's, you know, that's the kind of mind bending, you know, you have to be able to put yourself into other ways of seeing the world. Yeah.
Yeah,
And find the
absolutely.
specific thing, right? Which is so important. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, which I didn't really get before I had the session with you, like how specific it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, really understanding that it's this particular moment in time, that once you find that one, then things are getting
Yeah.
easier from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, totally. Do you want to tell the story of your mom, the one that just happened? I think that's a pretty sweet one.
Yeah, so I just told my mom about German new medicine literally 2 days ago. I haven't had the language or the words to explain it in Finnish, which is my my language, but and then I was like, okay, I will give it a shot. And she was very open to the idea, which was nice. And I used the ear infections as an example. And then she's like, oh, that's so funny that you say that, because I actually have an ear infection. I've had it for 2 weeks and it's really bugging me and it's not going away. And I was like, oh, this is great. What an opportunity to try to,
Yeah.
poke on this and find the conflict shock. And I was asking her like what happened a couple of weeks back. Like, was there something that you'd
Mhm.
been wanting to hear that you finally heard, or
Mhm.
the opposite, that you didn't want to hear something and you did? And then I suddenly had this moment of like, oh, I remember. Do you remember 2 weeks ago? My son, who my mom hasn't seen in a year because she lives in Finland and we're in Australia, um, he we were FaceTiming with my mom, and my son was pointing the screen and said, oh, grandma. And it was such a big deal for my mom. She was like, oh, my life is complete. He remembers me. Did you hear, everyone? He's calling me grandma. And she kept talking about it and sending me messages about it like days later. It's like, I'm so happy. And for her, obviously, it's been a big deal that we live so far away and they haven't seen each other. And then she was worried that my son would not remember her or know who she is. And hearing my son say that word, grandma, to her was very healing and important. And then, yeah, she developed the ear infection on her right ear a couple of days later. And then I spoke with her for an hour. And then towards the end of the call, she was like, oh, my ear is really itchy now. It's really itchy. Like she was like, I want to scratch the hell out of it, like put my fingers inside and just scratch it. And I was like, oh, weird. That's interesting. And then the next day she told me, yeah, I have no pain anymore. It's gone. And that was so fascinating, a very successful moment for me. And the first time
only
just
every first telling about German new medicine went that smoothly. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, I think that just is the power of like, I mean, I just love it, right? Like, you know it. And so you can like, especially it's even easier when you are embedded in someone's life already. Like, because, when I'm coming, fresh to work, because I mean, I got to learn a lot about someone's life to figure out, I got to ask her about the birds that are on her balcony, like it takes a while. We get there, but like you can, when you are the wise woman embedded in your community and this, and it's like you can often help people get there because you just are living your life with other people. And so you were there for a lot of their conflict shocks sometimes. And so, or you really just know who they are and their idiosyncrasies and, what questions to ask. And, yeah, I love that. And you never know, like, oh, your mom, and also what a sweet thing to learn about your mom. Like your mom's so values that kind of like auditory expression of affection and like affirmation of a relationship. Yeah, just super sweet, adorable story.
Yeah, I think so too. It was a really sweet one.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll just close because you told me this on our call the other day, and I liked the way you what you said to your husband when he's been witnessing you, I guess, like do kind of all of this, but skeptical, and he's had the like hand eczema, right?
Yeah,
Which you've been observing. It's like he doesn't have it when he goes to work, and then he has it when he comes home and he's reunited with you and baby. Anyways, you said he kind of came to you the other day and was like, okay, like, what do I do? And what did you, I love the way you said and what you told him to go and do.
Yeah, so he came home from work after being away for 2 weeks, and immediately his hands are having a lot of like these burning sensations, and he almost gets this like nerve kind of pain, and the skin cracks and gets like
I wonder if he's running the periosteum as well, because that's like the surface layer of skin is it's a separation conflict, but then the periosteum is the skin around the bone, and that's like a severe separation, brutal, kind of more dramatic type of separation. So he could be running both at the same time.
Yeah, that would make sense. And yeah, these symptoms started for him when he started working away, like before we even had our son. And at that time he would only have it on his right hand. And then what's interesting, when our son was born and he kept doing this work, he also got it on his left hand. So I'm like, oh, it's clear as day to me, and how he would have zero symptoms at work, and they would he said that it almost starts like when he gets to the plane, like he's on his way home, and by the time he gets home it's a full on like flare up is what's happening.
So basically, if you were listening, he would have had the original conflict, sounds like, before baby, and then a new one would have expanded with the baby. But it's like he's on the track when he's away at work, like he's missing you, he's feeling that like separation from his people, and then the moment he gets on the plane, he's going to come home, he's going to get to embrace you and be close with you, so he comes off the track, and now he's in the symptom.
So for months I've been telling him like, oh, this is the healing, like trying to make him, and he's a paramedic. He comes from a very Western medicine kind of background, so for him the deconditioning is different. whereas like I'm someone who's been hiding antibiotics since I was a like I never wanted I never wanted them. So like so yeah, it's different. And anyway, so this time around when he came home and I'd recently solved the yeast infection and the cold sore, and I had a lot of things, you know, and I told him all about it. So I guess he'd gotten a little bit curious. So he was saying, oh, so what do I need to do? It's like, I've got my hands are burning. So what do I do? And it's the first time he has ever like asked me. So I felt like there's an invitation for me to share some of it. So I just told him to go and lay on your bed and just think about how much you missed us and how nice it is for you to be home right now. You can touch us, you can, you know, embrace us, and then think about the burning you have in your hands, and like build that bridge between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was laying there for for quite some time, and yeah, he hasn't really complained about the burning sensation as much. Like his skin is still definitely cracked and it's not gone fully, but yeah, I'm just happy that he asked.
Totally.
And
there's something just like, I don't know, so touching for me. Like, I just love this idea of like, you know, you don't like the wise woman of your family doesn't, you know, she's not handing you the tinctures anymore. She's not doing all, you know, she's just go to bed, lay down and build a bridge between this moment and that, you know, yeah, I love it.
yeah, and I definitely, you know, went down the whole supplement route since, you know, whatever, and now it's like, oh, I don't really need the supplements anymore. And it's funny because I got my husband into all of these different supplements, you know, trying to heal the eczema or whatever, and then he's like, oh, well, that's nice. We don't have to spend as much money on all of these like tablets.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's happy. He's happy.
I mean, it's like the ultimate, you're like the ultimate healer when you have this, right? Because you heal with words, like questions, really. Like questions become the medicine. If you can find the right question, it's like you just everything unfolds. You know, you don't need a big medicine chest. It's all just in your head and your heart and your, you know, your intuition. And there's just something very precious and like so powerful about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I'm so happy.
Is there anything else you want to share before we close?
No, I think those were the sort of the main stories I had in mind.
Oh, I'm curious. Okay, actually, I just have one question for you, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but you know, how old is your son now?
He's 18 months.
18 months. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, just, you know, as a new mom, how has learning this information, maybe it hasn't, but I'm guessing it has, shifted the way you view your baby and like the intelligence or consciousness of a baby that's, you know, not like they're not a fully, you know, 5, 6, 7, like able to have really these big conversations with you. I'm just curious how it's maybe changed your perception of how aware babies are. And, you know, if I'm just guessing you're gonna have more kids, like how you're kind of thinking about that in the future. And anyways, yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I feel like because I've been on this, whatever you want to call it, healing personal development journey for quite some time, I already had this understanding that babies are definitely not these potatoes that just come out and like unconscious for years. I knew that they are like real people and real personas the second they land on the earth side. And you know, I do human design as my work, so I, you know, understand like there's different like energetic blueprints that are born, you know, that we're all so unique, and we have to sort of treat kids as they are and not how we want them to be. So that was sort of how I started the journey as a mom. But there was definitely this thing of like, I didn't think that you could have these, you know, difficult sort of conversations with babies, and there's this like, what's the correct amount of information you want to share with your kids. And what GNM really helped me with was this like newfound understanding of like, okay, they are already present in all of these situations, like they already know what's up. They only lack the words and the sort of the affirmations from us that, yeah, even though like we had this difficult moment or this scary moment or the moment where you felt alone, it's like we need to help them to understand that it was okay and it was safe, and they sort of need the information from us. And it's really helpful to talk to them and tell them everything, whereas before I was like, oh well, he doesn't need to know the whole or the every little thing about what has happened in these situations. And like let's say us moving from Finland to Australia, like I did tell him that we're about to move, but I didn't explain specifically why we're moving, what's happening. I didn't tell him everything. He didn't have all of the information. So like going forward, I know to give them that, like when they're asleep. So now what I'm doing, I don't know if it's GNM in particular, but like before things happen, I talk to him when he's asleep. He's asleep and I tell him what is about to happen next week. Or if I had like a disagreement with my partner and he was there, like on that night, I'll tell him exactly what happened. So to kind of avoid perhaps the
I mean, I think it's so interesting, right? Because like when you learn this, then you start thinking about preventative, right, medicine. And okay, there's some, people say, well, you can't prevent conflict shocks, right? Like, and I don't think you can't, and also you don't want to be impenetrable to adaptation, right? And like I don't think, but I've thinking about your story, like I've definitely had the question. I wonder if in those 2 weeks before your husband went away for the first time after your baby was born, if you had said, like every day daddy's gonna go away, like daddy, he works away, these are photos of where he works, and then he comes home and he takes an airplane, and like kind of just and I wonder if you've done that every day for 2 weeks, would he have had the conflict? And maybe he totally still would have, because it's still even with some awareness, this is the experience of, like, oftentimes we can know something is going to come, but then the experience of it is still different than what we imagine it might be. But when we know that one of the criteria for conflict shock is the surprise, it is the being caught off guard. This didn't occur to me that it was a possibility to happen. And that's why kids get sick so often, is because there's endless firsts for a child. There's so many things that they do not know are possible, like that these things can happen in the world. And the older we get, the more we understand that, okay, people can say these things and this can happen and that can happen, and you're less likely to be caught off guard. Whereas that's what, like, children get the most symptoms in the first years of going to school, because there's so many new social experiences to be had that can be surprising. But anyways, I love this experiment that you're running. I think, it's when you learn this, you start getting creative of like, well, what does this mean about how we treat children and also how, I mean, I just think so much too about how do we treat mothers and pregnancy, and I do so much work with adults, and so much of it we are going back to the first year of life and or gestation, like being in the womb, and like how we would have to be as a culture if we all knew this information, like just the peace and the joy and the safety of a mother would just be like of prime importance, because that's laying the blueprint for the next generation. So I love pondering these things.
Yeah, and definitely if we're having more kids, I'd be so much more mindful about the pregnancy time and the conception, and I already had pretty, you know, stress-free lifestyle and, you know, quote unquote healthy in all the ways that I thought
Yeah.
I could be, but there's definitely things I would do differently
Mhm.
going forward, or when I'm pregnant next time. And you
Yeah.
know, even like preparing my son for the new baby, how much I could help him process the new sibling
Yeah.
coming to the world by explaining it all
Yeah.
prior. And you know what I mean, like if someone told me that I'm about to go to this Christmas party and this man's gonna kiss me in the lips, if I knew that prior, I'm
Yeah.
sure I wouldn't have had the cold
Mhm.
sore, because I would have known it's like, okay, this is an experiment I have to live through, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
100% it would help
Yeah.
giving the information if possible.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I love it when people get it. And like for me, this is my goal. It's like, it's not, just resolving individual symptoms, but it's um helping people come in like real relationship with that pattern, and um because then you're just off, and in the world and just seeing it all the time. And that's, yeah, nothing makes me happier. So thank you so much for sharing all of this.
And thank you for having me, and thanks for sharing about GNM. That's why I know about it.